Is it recording?
Yep.
Hello.
We're on.
So hey guys, my name is Hooman. I'm a driver. I drift. I drive in Formula Drift Pro 2 right now. I go by I'm Only Hooman in the drift world, and you've probably might have seen my car. It says I'm Only Hooman on the side. Been driving for maybe 10 years for fun, and maybe about 5 years for, give or take, kind of getting more serious about it. I am one of the co-founders of Turismo Drift, and I'm here to answer questions and basically talk about Turismo mostly. So yeah. So last year, maybe right before last year, I had the desire to help the community. I kind of saw a need for a little difference in drifting, and what I saw was competition drivers kept saying, oh, it's just too expensive, or it's not fun, or whatever, and I was confused, really. I was like, what do you mean it's not fun? I don't get it, because I have a blast. That's, for me, that's the most fun I have. Drifting is typically in competition driving. So I thought, okay, what can I do in my region to kind of change this? What can I try? And I had some ideas on changing the format of competition, changing the way that typical top 16 works with qualifying and stuff like that. And I said, hey, how can I do this? And basically, I approached Louis Garza with East 10 Drift, and really a lot of local guys too, to see what we could do. And I ended up saying, okay, let's throw a person there, attract drivers from other regions, make the driving better so that the spectating is more entertaining, because part of one thing I see in drifting that people that aren't in the drift community get bored easily at certain drift events. Not that it's not entertaining, but watching beginner drifting isn't as entertaining as watching better driving. So I said, okay, let's throw in some money, make the drift event more attractive for better drivers to come out and have a reason for them to come want to compete down in this region from other areas, to draw it in, which would help grow the drivers that are kind of getting into it in our region. Because Tennessee and Nashville, we have a decent drift community, but it's not as large as probably on the West Coast or different areas. So basically I grouped with these guys, and we started Turismo Drift, and we threw a couple ideas here and there and just try things to make it better. One of my ideas was, let's get rid of qualifying. How do we do that? Qualifying is very, very, very boring to watch, and it wastes a lot of time. And typically in an event that I've competed in, if you throw qualifying in, you get rid of so much practice time. And my goal with this, with Turismo, is make the event about driving, spectating, and just having fun throughout the day. Get rid of the things that maybe they have their pros. So don't get me wrong, there's pros of qualifying, but for me, those pros weren't so important as all the other pros that you would get by getting rid of it. And so we created basically a full bracket. Whatever number of drivers come, they're all going to compete. The way we qualify is really the same thing as qualifying, but we seed. So we have the judges watch during the day, and basically they seed the drivers 1 through 32 or whatever number of drivers show up, and then they get put in a bracket the same way you would with your qualifying score, and then they compete. I've had some ideas to do some more than just a simple bracket, and maybe in the future we'll bring in some of that. That stuff kind of gets complicated, and timing, especially with one-day event. Basically, my idea was, what I have seen in drifting is drivers who barely make the cut or don't make the cut get discouraged and stop competing. And you know, my personal experience from this is I started in drifting with a stock V6, you know, VQ 350Z with a cage and a diff and coilovers, and that's it. I had not even a hydro, you know, my first year. I literally had just experience from grassroots events, never tandem ever, like literally never tandem, because the rules when we were growing up driving were you don't have a cage, you can't tandem. So what happened, you know, is you would drive in these events, and if you don't qualify, your day is half a day. You don't get, you know, most of the other driving in. A lot of these events would have practice sessions for the top 16. So even in that practice session, you're just watching those guys and you don't even get to drive with them, and you're like, man, that really sucks. Like you spend a lot of money. So I mean, like a lot of people are like, oh, drifting's not attainable and it's so expensive. Well, it's just as expensive to do grassroots, in my opinion, as it is to do competitive drifting, for the most part, in the sense that the travel costs, the tire costs, you can spend the same amount of money. You can get crazy with your car and do all this, but you don't necessarily have to have fun at a competition event. So what I believe is this whole idea of a top 16 in especially like lower levels, this guy, you know, me for example, would go and I drive 9-10 hours to an event, and I've had so many events where I qualified 17th or 9th when they cut off, you know, a top 16, they made it a top 8. I would literally not get to drive, and I got 9th place, and I'm like, man. And it was 9th out of like, you know, 30 drivers sometimes, and or 17th, you know, out of 30 guys, and it's like, all right, I'm in the middle of the pack, just wasn't quite there, and I spent all this money, and then I don't even get to compete. And it's like, well, one, it motivated me to drive better, I get that, but it did discourage me in a sense that I was like, man, I'm spending all this money, all this time, a lot of people, you know, it's expensive. Part of the expense is quality time away from family, friends. You know, you basically sacrifice your weekend and, you know, some of your work week, typically, and that's what got expensive for me. And I was like, man, I'm spending a lot of this time, and I'm not even like making it into the competitive part, which that's what I came here to do. Yeah, you get to tandem and practice and whatnot, but so my idea was, let's get rid of that and let the smaller underdogs have a chance to compete across the board. You know, give them a shot, because some guys are just not as good at qualifying, and sometimes, like, this is what gets crazy, is when you qualify, you're judged on 2 runs, right? So sometimes those 2 runs weren't your typical runs. You might get nervous, you might mess up. Sometimes it was a flat out, you broke right before that qualifying. So it's like, I lost, you know, whatever, because my car, you know, wouldn't start right before my qualifying run, or, you know, sometimes you break an axle right before, something like that, especially at a lower level. And I thought, you know, we needed to basically reduce the number of drivers that get discouraged from driving, because in my opinion, the only difference that should be between a competition event and like a fun, you know, fun only event is there's a competition added, which should take away from that amount of time if you get knocked out. But everything else is fairly the same amount of driving, and same, you should be spending the same amount of money, period. What's the difference? You know, if you're driving, you're competing, you're not, you know, you're driving the same amount. If your car is, you know, faster, yeah, you're gonna use up more tires, stuff like that, but, you know, things break faster, the more power you add, stuff like that. But either way, it should be just as fun. Turismo isn't about one type of driver. It's about a broad spectrum of driver. What my idea was, I want the guy that's awesome at driving to come out. I want the guy that's, you know, an underdog to come out. I want the guy that's still learning but wants to learn and get the track time to come out. The only thing I don't want is the drama queens, you know, the guys that they're not there to have fun. Like, if you're not here to have fun, then don't come. Like this event is not for you. If you're here, and it's a serious thing and you're like, whatever, like, no, don't do that. Like, stay home. But if you're here to have fun, drive with great drivers, learn to get, and not just learn, because some people think like, I know what I'm doing. You only get better by driving with better drivers. So, if you drive with better drivers and still like suck, still you're not doing that great, you're gonna learn, because you're gonna follow drivers that are better than you, doing a better line. You'll be like, oh man, that's what I'm doing, that's what I was wrong. Like I learned a lot chasing better drivers, seeing better drivers drive the same course as me, because it's like, oh, that's where they're initiating, or this is how they're carrying it, this is where they're off throttle, different stuff like that. So where I think I'm doing awesome, and then this guy comes in, does something, and I'm like, oh man, I'm not doing awesome, I could do way better than this. And that's where it is. So it's not really about one driver, or one type of driver. It's really about letting all types of drivers, especially helping the guys that are, lower budget, less, they don't have like sponsors, or they're still new, they don't, they don't have a big social media following or anything like that where they can go approach sponsors. So basically it's about getting those guys the opportunity to drive with great drivers on a competitive level. So it's not just, oh yeah, I drove with this guy, and it's like, no, you get to drive where that guy is pushing his limit, and you get to learn like what they're trying to do. And the money aspect, like the purse that's there, it's attractive to a lot of drivers, but I don't want it to scare drivers away where they're like, oh, I can never win that because X and XYZ's over here, and this guy, he's got so much power, and there's no way I could win. And the question I asked some of those drivers is like, well, let's pretend you had the same car as that guy. Would you be able to beat him with the same car? And a lot of those drivers, they might think they could, but getting that experience first is really important. It's a steep learning curve to learn how to drive well. Unless some people don't have that steep learning curve, but a lot of people, it takes time to really finesse and get better at driving. If you've driven it, you would know why. That is, so we originally booked that track, and we were going to run a similar layout of just kind of the infield. It was a lower speed, not using the bank. And then we came up with the idea like, hey, what about the bank? Like, how would that work? So we tested it. I drove it literally one time, linked it. My first try, like, not like to say I was bragging, like it wasn't the best run or anything, but it was just so fun. Like, it was like, that bank it's the longest bank I've ever driven. It might be the steepest that I think is driftable in America, maybe. It's 18 degrees. That's pretty steep. I don't know if it's the steepest, but it's pretty high up there. And it's a long, wide bank. Like, driving that bank is just phenomenal. And then like the infield driving, it's technical and sets you up for close tandem. So like you have an advantage for, I would say, like the bank, you get an advantage as a high powered car, but you can close that gap on the second side. And also, Nashville's my hometown, so this is kind of where I'm trying to grow drifting in my community, because it's my local community. That's really important to me, that drifting grows, and I'm able to do more, obviously, in my city. Safety, that's it. Basically, having a full cage, race suit, harness, seats, that kind of stuff. Basically, the only thing that we care about here is safety. We're not saying you have to be so-and-so fast or whatever. Simple safety stuff that, really, in my opinion, if you're tandem drifting, you should have all these things. I am all about growing the drivers. Like, there's so many drivers that they just start, at a level and like they want to go to the next level, and then I don't know what blocks them sometimes, and like I hear, oh, competition's not fun, and I see weird stuff that I really get confused with, like certain series, like I've seen where their first event they have X number of people, second event, third event, and then the fourth event there's not as many, and then people were like, well, the points gap was so large it was like pointless. I'm like, well, is it though? Like, if you love drifting and you want to compete, does the points really matter? Like, is that really why you're going there? Like, if you're going there because you want your license or whatever, that's cool, but let's pretend you were at the bottom of the pack. You weren't really going for your license your first year in it or second year, whatever. Like, shouldn't you enjoy drifting and go because you enjoy it? That's where I kind of see some difference of opinion with people that I don't quite agree with. I think, like, if you're enjoying competition and enjoying driving, like, you should drive. Goal of this event is for drivers to have a great time, spectators to have a great time, staff to have a great time. That's it. I mean, really, the goal is to have a fun time drifting, and then get the non-drift community involved with drifting, to know what drifting is. I'm tired in my life of talking to people and like, I drift. What's drifting? Is that Tokyo Drift? Like, how do you win? I don't get it. Like, I just, like, that really, makes me go crazy sometimes. So, like, I want the general population to know what drifting is so that we can grow as a community, because if the general population, right now, if you say the word NASCAR, everybody knows what NASCAR is. And some people are like afraid that drifting gets too big, then it hurts the grassroots, and like I think it's the opposite. Like, I think as drifting grows, grassroots can only get better, because there's a lot of drivers out there that drive in other kinds of sports, and then they get a wind of drifting and they try it and they're like, this is awesome. The more people that know what it is, the easier it is to have grassroots events. If a grassroots event, they need to break even to have those events. They need to keep the costs down, and they need spectators to show up. They need drivers to commit to be able to have those events. It's so much easier to have those events if more people know what drifting is and they want to come out and support it, especially at the local level, and come ride in cars and stuff like that. So, I'm trying to, in my area, bridge that gap between people that know what drifting is and the people that are just like, what's drifting? Like, what? Like, and it's crazy, like, how many people that have no idea what it is, except, like, some of them have a vague understanding, like, oh, it's where you slide, but they really don't get it. So, it's about education, I think. Somebody's gonna walk home with $5,001, set of Cosmos wheels, a trophy, and I think if you are a driver there, you're gonna have a great time. You're a spectator, you're gonna see some awesome stuff, you're gonna have a great time. There's a lot of stuff going on at the event. We're trying to do extra stuff at the event, like we have demo driving. We did car show with Slammed Enough, which is awesome. They do a great job. We're doing RC drift competition. We're having the guys. So one of the things I added this year is if you get knocked out early, you go drive with the demo drivers. You get to keep running and keep the show going, because a lot of times you're watching and there's so much dead time. Let's kill that dead time and let you get back and get in the public eye and get in front of people's eyes so you can get new followers. We're doing a 360 contest. We're doing a grudge match battles, which I think that's freaking awesome. We're gonna do that in practice. People can call out their friend that they're driving with and battle them. I don't know. There's tons of stuff we're doing, but yeah, just if you're in the area or not in the area, come out to see us November 18th at the fairgrounds in Nashville. We start the show at 2 o'clock, and it's gonna be a blast.